Hello, everyone. Lovely to see every single one of you guys in here today. I was going to wait a little bit longer, but we can just go ahead and start. So, my name is Mallory Draper. Some of you guys might know me, some of you guys might not. I am the parents of Dana Draper and the late Christian Draper. I am 18 years old, and I will be graduating from Sinton High School in May. I plan to attend Pitt State in the fall of 2023 to double major in exercise science and communications. Now, some of you guys have probably been seeing my project on Facebook, in the newspaper, so any kind of social media has kind of been promoted on Instagram and social media as well. So I started this project in last fall, so actually I think about 6 months ago this month. So I couldn't really tell you kind of the background of how I started it. It was kind of just like a calling. I just got that random idea. I was like, oh my gosh, that would be so cool. And so I went and used FCCLA because every project, every organization, whatever you would like to call it, it needs a foundation, a building block to get you started. So I used FCCLA. I have been in FCCLA for 7 years now. It is a great organization, and it has done me wonders of wonders. So if you guys don't know what FCCLA stands for, it stands for Family, Career, Community Leaders of America. And that is what we promote is, family, career, communities, and we are leaders in America. So like I said, FCCLA was the original organization that Speak Up was partnered with. I did it for one project when we went to Independence High School because it was kind of just like kind of see how it goes. I have an idea. We have to, kind of trial and error, see what works and see what doesn't. And I wanted to get more people involved because some people, this isn't just about me. We are sitting in this sanctuary together not just to support me, but to support every single person that we have either lost, that have suffered, or is still suffering from this disease that so unfortunately a lot of people have to go through. And so it's not just about me, and I didn't want it to just be about me. And so I got our FCCLA officers, and there are 4 of us. 2 of them, Maddie Hurt and Levi Dell, are also seniors, and they kind of just helped, background. They're not really, the public speaker kind of people, but they did want to be involved and they did want to help. And so that's how we kind of got them involved with just background, ideas. And then they were there to help in small groups. And then Thane Scrivener, he's a sophomore, and he also has a very good story to share that I think has helped a lot of people. But unfortunately, I'm graduating, and he has other things that he wants to pursue. And so it's not on the top of his bucket list or to-do list right now. Speak Up is a project that I designed to bring awareness to mental health illness by personal experience. Now, I don't know a lot of people that just randomly just start talking about mental health. They don't volunteer to go speak in front of 50 to hundreds of people. And I don't know a single 17-year-old that would volunteer to do that. And so I think it's important, and that's why I do this, because I think it's important. And then mental health is something that goes on, in our school, at your workplace, in the community. I see it so much, but it's something that, like I said, is never talked about. And I think that we need to normalize in our households, in our schools, in our communities, whether we work in the communities or not, just bringing and openly talking about mental health. And there's a lot of older people in the generation, younger people in the generation, or just us that are like me, that are, in high school. We don't know what depression looks like. And that was my problem. I didn't know what it looked like and what it felt like. And that's why it took me so long to realize that I wasn't okay. And so I also show, signs and symptoms of what it can look like, because I think it's important to know when a loved one or a friend is suffering so you can get them the help if they aren't willing to get the help themselves. So a couple disclaimers. This presentation is based off of what I have went through. I'm not going to stand up here and talk about other people that I know, their symptoms and their signs and their story, because this is my story, and it could help a lot just by sharing and talking about it, because some people are going to relate to what I have went through. Another one, like I said, I'm not a professional. I'm not a doctor, a psychologist, a therapist. I'm just a teenager that has went through a lot of the same things that everyone goes through now. Next slide, please. Things not working. Alrighty, so one thing that I do in small groups, because like I said, we originally started in Independence High School as small groups, and when I went there, I got feedback from a lot of people, but one of them that stuck with me was the advisor. She emailed me a couple days later and was kind of giving me a follow-up, and one of the things that she said in that email at the end was like, I just want you to know that there were 3 individuals I can name right now that were struggling and they needed assistance, and because of you guys, they got the help that they need, and you might have saved a life. You might have saved a life. And that stuck with me, and that's why I kept going. I knew that day that this was something that could impact so many people. And it's a blessing that a voice can do that. And one of the things that we did in small groups was an activity called Depressional Factors. And I would give them to a piece of notebook like paper, and I would want them to answer one of 2 questions. And one of them was, what do you think the biggest factor that has led to your mental health illness? And then number 2 is, if you've never went through a mental health illness before, what do you think other people's leading factors were? And I don't throw statistics in my presentation. I think that I have one single one. I like to use the information that I have in my presentation because it is my presentation, my story. And anxiety was the top leading factor in middle schoolers and teens' depression and mental health illnesses. And I bet you that goes for adults as well, not just teenagers or middle schoolers. And then stress and school came after. And there was a lot more, but those were the main ones that just went off the charts. And so, of course, I added stress and anxiety into my presentation. Now, I don't go through, obviously I'm stressed, I'm a senior. That's what I'm going to blame it on. And I wouldn't say that I have anxiety, like I need, medicine and stuff like that, but I do suffer from it, so I have some experience. Now, stress is usually how you feel under pressure, or you're frustrated, or you need to get something done, or you don't want to get something done, and you need to. It can be broad, but usually it's how I feel under pressure. And then some of the signs that I have from that, or symptoms, is I always have trouble sleeping. My hair falls out of my head. I have aches and pains in my chest, which have hit a lot more this year. Headaches, and this is another one, but I don't really suffer from this, but high blood sugar. And then anxiety. Now, anxiety is one of the biggest ones, and sadly, I can't get up here and talk to you guys about anxiety as much as I wish I could be able to, like I can depression, but I always like to add that in here. Anxiety is an intense, excessive, and persistent fear or worry in everyday situations. Now, you can be anxious about a lot of different things. Like I said, anxiety is broad. You're not going to be anxious about the same things that other people are. And like I said, I've never had to go to the doctor for medication because it gets too bad. I've kind of learned how to maintain mine. I've done trial and error, coping mechanisms, and I'm at the point where I'm content and I know how to get help, or I can talk to someone. But symptoms that I personally have is, fast heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating, my face gets really red, and sometimes I will have like mini panic attacks. I'll freak out, I'll start crying, I'll overthink, I have a fear of something. But how I do that, or because I get a lot of questions from teenagers, how do you just have these things happen to you and be okay and overcome them? And I just simply say, well, I know how to control them, and I've been lucky and fortunate enough to not have horrible anxiety issues like some people are. But I drill into teenagers in everyone's head that coping mechanisms are the best thing that you can have. I use it like as a math problem. There's a solution, there's a problem, and there's usually always a solution. And now it might not be an eternity solution, but it's something that you can have then and there when you need it. And what I do, a lot of these are for stress, because like I said, I suffer from stress more than I do anxiety. But some of the ones I do is just taking time for yourself, because you are the most important person, especially when you're suffering from something like mental health. Make your workload smaller. Now, what I realized was when I was going through depression, I didn't want my mind to go to reality and remember that I'm not okay. I always wanted to have something going on, so I didn't have to go home and go in my room and think about what I was actually going through. I wanted to stay busy, but making your workload smaller and stuff like that, it makes you realize a lot more. And that stress and all that stuff of getting this stuff done, it's not going to help your depression or anything. It's just going to add on to it. And then, balancing your workload. So, all three of those, they're pretty similar. And now anxiety triggers. Now, this is what has helped me with my anxiety. And I like to give it to teenagers through school a lot because I know that teenagers have anxiety in school. They have panic attacks. And so one person the other day was in math class, and they came out, and I was in the hallway, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And they were like, Mallory, I don't really know. I just got really, really anxious, and I started having a panic attack, and I don't even know why. I was just sitting in a math class. And I was like, okay, well, rewind. What were you doing in that moment that you started getting anxious? Because you have to know what is making you anxious in order to establish why it is making you anxious. And so I'm always go back, fast or rewind, see what the problem is. And one silly thing, because you're going to have some things that are just dumb that make you anxious, and then you're going to have some that aren't so dumb and serious. And one of the dumbest ones that I feel like I have is I cannot walk in front of a crowd of people, in football games, baseball games, anything you can name, even if it's at Sedan. I can't do it. I just can't. And so I know that's why. I know that's what is causing it, but why was it causing it? Well, I think it's just a simple fact that I'm scared what people are going to think, or I think I'm going to fall. Because if you know me, I'm very clumsy, and I tend to do that a lot. And that's probably, one of the biggest things that scare me. I don't want to make a fool out of myself. And so I always have someone walking with me. I always, even if it's a stranger and I'm literally hiding behind them and hoping they don't turn around, I'm at least with someone, and that's what helps me. And we're not going to be able to be helped and feel content. We have to find our own. And these might not work for you, but, it's something to start with. Okay, Mallory is doing this. Okay, let me see. If it doesn't work, you can fix it to how you function, because you guys aren't going to think like me, or your brain's not going to function like mine. So, now depression. So, depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and a lack of interest, and is a chemical imbalance in your brain. But that's not what I think of when I think of depression. Whenever I think of depression, I think of a monster. I think of something that just crawls into your body, and the only reason it's there is to take your body over. It wants to destroy you. And some people like to, like to say as it's similar to Satan. That's not really the word, but I couldn't think of it. Similar to Satan. Satan's only reason to be in your life is to pull you away from God. And that's like depression. It's only wanting to pull you away until one day it might. And there's probably a bunch of symptoms. But, when I think of depression, not only do I think of a monster, but I think of sadness. I think of being isolated. I think of crying. But the biggest one is numb. I think that was the biggest one that I suffered from, was just being numb. You have no feeling, but you have all these emotions, but at the same time you don't. So then it just frustrates you. And you're just like, what the heck is going on? And like I said, I don't have statistics, but there is one statistic, and I was reading an article back, 6 months ago when I was first starting this, and it said approximately 280 million people in this world have been diagnosed with depression. And you're like, Mallory, well, that's all 7 continents. That's not really a lot of people. But think about the people that lose their life to depression. Think about the people that don't go get diagnosed, that suffer silence. Those aren't added into those statistics because no one knows. They don't go to the doctor. And when you think of that number probably doesn't just double. It quadruples. And it's just crazy. And I like to just have that out there so people can realize how insane and how much depression has impacted people's lives and the number of lives it's impacted. Now, the stages of depression: denial, diagnosis, and recovery. Now, denial is the one that is probably the one you'll be in probably the second longest period of time, but this stage is the one that can kill you or you can overcome in this one. And there, like I said, there's only 2 options. It can kill you or you can keep living. And denial is one that I was in forever. Because, like I said, I didn't know what depression looked like. I didn't get talked about depression a whole lot, so I didn't, know. And no one really talked about it, so I didn't know who to look at and be like, okay, well, those are the symptoms and signs they have. So, and I have the kind of the same one, so maybe I have depression. And then diagnosis. And I don't mean diagnosis like going to the doctor and getting, the doctor writing on a note saying you have depression or you have anxiety or you are bipolar. That's not what I mean. I mean when you are willing to accept and tell yourself, I have depression. When you're willing to look at someone and be like, I have depression. And then recovery. And then now this is the one that a lot of people are confused about. Because people like to ask me, and like I'm not, bashing any of these people for asking me, because some people, they don't know, and I didn't know. And I'll talk about this more later. But people think that recovery, there's an expiration date. And there's not. You're not going to wake up one morning and not feel like you had depression. You're not going to wake up and be like, oh, I'm depression free. It's not the flu. It's not strep throat. It's not any of those things where the doctor's going to say, come back in a couple of days if you feel better, if you don't feel better. That's not how it is. Because I hate to say it, because you will probably most likely fight depression the rest of your life. And it's something, like I said, can kill you, or you can keep overcoming and taking a step forward every single day. And then steps to address your depression. Realizing that you are not okay. Reaching out to someone. Because, like I will say again, you cannot do this by yourself. But that's one thing that I didn't realize, because I'm a very independent person, and I didn't realize that how truly horrible, depression can get. Because I just thought, okay, I finally realized that I have it, I'll change a couple things, and then maybe in a couple months, I'll be fine. No reason to talk to about anyone. No, that's not how it goes. You have to get help, and you have to reach out. And then acceptance. Like I said, being okay with having depression, because everyone's scared. I was scared. Like, what is my family or friends going to think of me when I say this? Because some people, they don't think depression or any of these mental health illnesses are real. They think it's fake. They'll tell you, oh, that's not actually real. Everyone just says it is, and you need to man up. Because then what I'm going to get into is stereotypes. And there are two huge ones that I will cover. And that's the first one is more towards the men. But people stereotype you and say you are men, so you don't have feelings. And if you do have feelings and you're willing to admit that, you are weak. Because your only job in this world is to put on those boots and go to work and provide for your family. And a lot of people think like that. And then men get bashed, like by their bros or something. Like, oh, you're crying? You're a wimp. Like, man up. Men, they can't talk. They cannot talk about their feelings. I see it in school all the time. But then when I see a man being okay with talking about their feelings, I'm like, you are literally so strong. Like, I don't know how you can do it. And not you can't do it because it's just genuinely hard, but because of the stereotype that you guys have on your backs. And then the other one, which has affected me more, is if you have everything, you have not a single reason to be depressed. And that's the one that got me, because I had everything. I had a family, I had friends, I was good in school, I had a future, but I was still stuck and I was still suffering, and I had no idea why, because of that stereotype when people would say, you have everything. Why are you sad, Mallory? You'll be okay. Wake up in the morning, cry about it, you'll be fine. And then I'll just leave these up. I'm not going to read these to you, but you guys can just overview them. And these are like a broad, I did get this off of a site. These are just, a broad list of symptoms that you could be experiencing. And sometimes it is hard to know if these symptoms are because you're actually depressed or if you're sad. And that's why I don't just give you the symptoms, I give you a story. So, my story. So, I think probably like 2-3 years ago is probably when I started suffering. And it was probably like a lot of teenagers. You have this thing called social media. A lot of you probably heard of it before. And it, likes to take over, people's minds. And it sometimes, actually, probably most of the time, is what is leading teens to depression, is because they're just sitting on their phone on social media comparing themselves to every other person. Like, okay, well, I'm not living like them, so am I actually worthy of living? Because I don't look like that. I don't do that. I don't have the friends. My family's not like that. I don't have that money. And so that's how it started, is me just feeling like I was completely broken inside. And I didn't know what was going on. And I didn't talk to my mom or my dad or anyone, because what are you supposed to tell your parents when you're just sad and you feel broken and you just want to not be here anymore, but you don't have a reason why? Like, how are you supposed to confront someone and say that? And I didn't know what it was until my father passed away, and then I started grieving and depression. And I don't know if you guys know, but depression and grieving, they don't mix very well. They don't at all. And like I said, I didn't know I had depression or I was suffering. So whenever I started grieving, I just thought it was another excuse. I'm just grieving. Like, I will get over this and I will be okay. And I'm going to read to you something that I actually had wrote in a journal, and I'm so glad that I was smart enough to do that, because now I can use it. And this is something, it's raw. This is how it feels. This is how I felt. So it says, what does depression look or feel like? For me, depression is not just a mental illness. It's a battle you have to fight every day when you wake up. The feeling of being trapped in a body that only seems to know pain. Your body mentally aches. You have no motivation to get out of bed. The feeling of being tired doesn't just seem like a not getting enough sleep. It's a getting too much sleep. Coming home tired of all the social interaction. Hiding in your room hoping that no one talks to you. The no communication to the people you love most. The endless numbness you feel. Seeming to not have any emotions. You want to cry, but you can't get a tear to shed. Laughing is the only way to thinking that everything is okay, but when there aren't any laughs left, you're stuck. Every day seems like a bad day. The things that made you once happy, you can't handle the thought of doing them. You want to let people know, but you don't know where to start. Hi, my name is Mallory Draper. I suffer from depression. Never genuinely being happy is my personality trait, but I choose to get help, and I start my journey to recovery hopefully forever. I wrote that on February 6th. And just reading it, because I just found it like the other week, just reading it and remembering what it felt like to be that way, and that no one knew, and that I thought that was normal. And then that's when I realized that I wasn't normal and something was going on. And so I decided, I was like, okay, I know I have this now, and I'm going to say something. And I told my mom. And the thing is that, like I said, people don't know about recovery isn't just a couple months. It's forever. And so I thought that I would be okay in a couple months. We got into therapy, and I started talking, and I still didn't actually open up about it. I didn't really like to talk about it with my friends. I was scared to death every time I had to get called to the therapist, because I didn't want anyone to know. I kept still doing the unhealthy things. I created an eating disorder. I went to the gym for the reasons that you probably shouldn't go to the gym for, and it was rough. But I thought, okay, because I got help and I told someone about it, I'll be okay. I didn't think you actually had to put work into it, because I thought it was magically just going to go away. But that's not, because on June 5th, I wanted to take my own life. And that's when I realized that you don't stop suffering, and you need to get help. Because when you're at the point where taking your own life is more valuable to you than staying with the family that you love and keep on living your life that God has planned for you, there's something wrong. And that's the sad thing, is some people, they don't have a second chance like I do. Sometimes they only have that first, and they yank that steering wheel and they're gone forever. And that could have been me. I could have yanked that steering wheel and I could have been gone. But something in my mind kept me on that path, and some people will have different reasons, but I say it's God. Because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here right now. And when I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, did you really just almost do that? Like, what were you thinking? You almost took yourself away from your family, your friends, your future. And that's why I call it a monster, is because it takes over your body until there is absolutely nothing left of you. You're not yourself. And that's when I started to prioritize my mental health over everything else. And that's when I actually started healing, is when I realized that if I didn't, then I might not be here. That, my second chance might, not be a third. And then I always get questions at the end of presentations, and so I like to start answering them through my presentations. And a lot of people come up to me and like, okay, Mallory, you went through this horrible thing. Is there anything that happened to you or that you learned through your journey that could probably help us? And one thing is normalizing not being in love with the same thing or the same person. Because whenever you start going through depression, you will not be the same person when you come out of it. You won't. Your body is changing. You start probably doing a lot of things differently after you get out of depression, because depression changed a person. And so you have to normalize falling out of love, whether you're in a relationship and you need to get a divorce, or whether you're at school and something that once made you happy doesn't make you happy anymore. And then one thing that I have a lot, but one thing that is on my mind and my heart right now would have to be like just softball. Like, I used to love the sport of softball, and I still do. But whenever I was going through depression, I could not stand on that field and not feel just pain shooting through my chest and the loss, And that's something to normalize, is I could have went and played this year, and I could have been miserable. Or I could have not played, and my mental health could, keep being alive and getting better. And sometimes you just have to pick your mental health over something that's not as important, like a sport. And that's what people don't understand, is sometimes you have those decisions, and mental health is always needs to be the answer. Whether it's, a marriage or mental health. Whether it's a friendship or mental health. Whether it's something silly like a sport or mental health, it's mental health. You have to put mental health first every day, because that's how you're going to recover. Put yourself first with your mental health. And like I said in the beginning, talking about mental health, it is a lot easier to heal from something that has traumatized you when you start normalizing talking about it with other people. Like my mom the other day, she looked at me and she's like, Mallory, I've never seen you happier than when you started doing this. And I didn't realize it, but it's true. Because I started talking about it and I was okay with it. And so normalizing and talking about mental health in your household, in your community, in your school, at your workplace, anywhere. And then another huge one is normalize finding the happiness in yourself. Every single day I feel like I have one person that comes to talk to me, and their one thing they say what is wrong is they're like, I have friends, but I still feel so lonely when I can't hang out with them, or I just feel like I'm not cared about. And that was me. I had a bunch of friends before when I was suffering depression, and I had to be with all of them at all times, and I had to feel like included because I hated being by myself because I felt lonely. And that's what a lot of people feel like. But the thing is, I am so much happier having no friends than having 5 or 10 friends, because I found the happiness in being okay with just myself. Like, I'm okay to go to Barsville and go hang out by myself. I'm okay to, go in the gym for hours just by myself. I'm okay with that. And I think until you find the happiness in yourself and being content with only you, you're never going to find happiness and be happy with someone else. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's friendship, whether it might be in your family. And then, like a lot of people ask, how did you remain in your recovery without going back, and what has helped you? And now, mine are pretty easy ones. Like, I didn't have to get on any medicine. I didn't have to, go and see like an actual Fort County mental health, therapist or anyone like that. And I just I just started, prioritizing myself and my mental health. I did start seeing a school therapist, like I said, and she helps a lot. I started actually talking about it, just getting exercise. Exercise is one of the things that makes me happy. Like, I could be having a bad day, and I could just want to sit and cry and, go back to, my sad, isolated self. I'm like, no, get up and go do something. And so I do, and I go to the gym a lot, and that's why, because that's where I find my peace when I'm not okay. And then, unless you're using the gym, like in the unhealthy way like I did in the past, then that's fine. Because I would rather you do that than go isolate yourself in your room and just cry. And then staying connected with your others, even if it is hard. If anyone has went through depression or any mental health illness, you know how hard it is to not just isolate yourself. Because that's the easiest thing to do, is to isolate yourself and not have to talk about it to anyone. Because it's hard to just start talking, and sometimes you don't want to talk. But one thing that I did that, my family probably never realized I did this, is I would just randomly go lay in my brother's room. Even though he would probably just try to kick me out, I would just go lay in his room. Or I'd have my mom come lay in my room with me, because even though I didn't want to talk to them and I wanted to be by myself, I knew that's not what I needed. And you're going to have to realize that. There are going to be some things that you want to do, but it's not what you need in that moment. And what I needed was to not isolate myself. And that's one of the things that helped me not isolate myself, was making someone be with me. Even if we weren't just talking, we still stayed connected that way. And that really helped me. And like I said, eating nutritious foods. Depression also makes you feel like you're never hungry and that you don't need to eat. And that was a hard one for me too. I never wanted to eat really, because it just made me feel disgusting. But food is fuel. You need that. And so sometimes you just have to, force yourself. And I don't mean it as just to the point where you're throwing up, but figure out how you can handle it. For me, I would just eat little things at a time in a bunch throughout the day. And I still do that some days when I just don't really feel like eating. Because you still have to have food, because food is fuel. And for people that are consistently active, food is a lot more important, especially since, you're, burning all of that. And then venting in healthy ways, and then writing. Obviously, I write all the time, because sometimes, there's just things that you don't want to talk to about people, but you need to say. And I've learned, journaling, it shows how much you've overcame in the years and how much you have grown. And I just love looking back at the things I used to write and seeing myself now. And then, like I said, venting in healthy ways. Now, this is, the most important, because you're not actually going to start recovering until you actually start venting and, doing things in the healthy ways. I always use this as for my teenagers, because I see it a lot in the teenagers. I also see it a lot in adults, but my audience has been mostly teenagers. But people like to come and talk about how they are depressed, but then all I see them do is partying and drinking, because they think alcohol is their solution. Because are you kind of happy? I mean, I see a lot of people, they're a lot happier whenever they're intoxicated. But what did it take you? 10 beers, 5 beers to get that? To be happy? You're not happy. You are. Because then the next morning, you're going to wake over and you're hungover and you're depressed. And that's no fun. And then let's talk about how vulnerable you already are when you're depressed, but intoxicated too. You have no control over your body, and you just do some of the dumbest stuff. And you think about adding depression into that. What are you going to do? What are you capable of doing when you're in that state? And I've seen some people growing up, and they get drunk and they're sad about family stuff, and they do some okay, you should not be doing that, because that could go really wrong. You could end up in jail, you could end up dead. Don't do that. But they don't care, because they're already depressed, they're drunk, so they feel like they have nothing. And so that's pretty much the wrap to my presentation. I do have a survey that you guys can do, and this survey is just easier because I like to know everyone's opinions. And when I'm at bigger schools and I'm talking to between 100 and 200 people, I'm not going to go around and talk to them and be ask them every single person, like, how did you like this? And I think it's easier because some people are a lot more honest whenever, you don't know who it is. And, like, I won't know who it is. And so I like to see what everyone thinks about this. And it's great for suggestions because whether I might not be going through it, you can tell me something like, oh, maybe you should just add this into your slide or your presentation so people will know that this is a thing. And I'll leave that up there so you guys can do it now. You can take a picture and do it later. But then in a minute, I'm going to change it to my merchandise QR code, and you can also do the same. And the store is open, and we get all of our merchandise usually within 3 weeks of the store opening, but we have to have like a certain amount of orders for him to actually start working on them. But the merchandise, I don't keep any of the money. All the money goes to charity. It goes to families that need it more than I do, because the merchandise isn't so I can make money. The merchandise is to spread awareness, because whenever I see someone wearing something, like, say on my sweatshirt, it says, "You matter." Whenever I'm behind someone and I see something inspirational, it makes me feel inspirational. I'm like, okay, this is so positive. And I think, just like how I said we need to start talking about mental health more, this isn't talking, but it's showing people. You don't even have to have a conversation to remind yourself that you matter or that you're not alone. And that's what my merchandise does. It's not for the money. It's to support every single person that has suffered or that is suffering, and reminding people that it's okay and that they matter. And I'm going to move it back to my merch, but I'm going to end on one thing. And this has stuck with me, and this will probably stick with me forever. But John 13:7 says, "You may not understand now, but one day you will." And let me tell you, I never understood why I had to go through the things I did, but I do now. And I'm very thankful and blessed that 6 months ago, God told me to come do this, because I affected so many lives, and I'm so thankful to have a voice that gets to do this. So I want to thank everyone for taking your time to come listen to me. I'll be here for a little bit, so if you guys want to come talk to me about anything, I'll try to make my rounds and talk to you guys before you leave. So thank you guys, and have a wonderful evening.